You have seen these symbols 1,000 times, but what if I told you they were never meant for your eyes? They were hidden in plain sight, etched into architecture, worn as jewelry, embedded in art, even slipping quietly into modern culture. And yet, almost no one truly understands what they mean, not because they are complicated, but because they were designed to be remembered, not explained. This happens because Gnostic symbols were never just decoration, but codes. Therefore, every time you glance at them, you are brushing against a forgotten language of awakening. Gnosticism, one of the most mysterious spiritual traditions in history, was never about blind belief, it was about knowing. The word itself comes from gnosis, meaning direct, inner knowledge. But here is where it becomes unsettling. Early Gnostics believed that the world you see is not the ultimate reality. Instead, they claimed it is a kind of illusion, a veil. This happens because they saw existence as layered, what is visible and what is hidden. Therefore, their symbols were not just artistic expressions, but maps pointing beyond the surface of reality. What makes this even more fascinating is that these symbols were often disguised. They appeared in cultures that officially rejected Gnostic ideas. They survived in fragments, in secret texts, in forbidden teachings, in images that looked harmless but carried deeper meaning. This happens because truth, when suppressed, does not disappear, it adapts. Therefore, these symbols became vessels, quietly carrying ancient knowledge across centuries, waiting for someone perceptive enough to notice. 1. The Ouroboros. Consider the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail. At first glance, it looks simple, even primitive, almost like a child's drawing etched into ancient stone. A snake consuming itself in a perfect circle, with no beginning and no end, no clear direction, no escape. This happens because the human mind expects symbols to be literal, to point towards something physical, something easily explained and contained within ordinary logic. We are conditioned to see shapes as objects, not as messages layered with meaning. But in Gnostic thought, the Ouroboros represent something far more profound than a mere depiction of a serpent. It embodies the illusion of a closed system, a reality that appears complete yet is secretly confined. Therefore, it reflects a world trapped in repetition, cycles of birth, death, and rebirth that never truly escape themselves, endlessly recycling existence without progression. It suggests a universe that feeds on its own continuity, sustaining itself by repeating the same patterns over and over again. What appears eternal may not be liberating, it may be imprisoning. The circle is not just unity, it is enclosure. And within that enclosure lies a subtle but unsettling implication. What if everything you perceive as forward movement is actually just a return to where you started, disguised by time and memory? But here's the conflict. If existence is a loop, where is freedom? Where does choice fit into a system that seems predetermined to repeat itself endlessly, recycling the same experiences under different forms? Gnostics believed the Ouroboros was not just a symbol of eternity, it was a warning, a quiet signal hidden in plain sight. A system that feeds on itself, sustaining its own illusion while convincing those within it that they are progressing. This happens because the material world, in their view, is self-contained and self-deceiving, operating like a closed circuit that generates its own sense of meaning without ever stepping outside itself to verify its truth. Therefore, the symbol quietly asks a disturbing question, one that lingers beneath the surface of everyday life. Are you living freely or simply repeating? Are your decisions truly your own, or are they echoes of patterns you have inherited, absorbed, and unconsciously obeyed. The deeper you reflect, the more unsettling it becomes, because the Ouroboros does not accuse, it reveals. It forces you to confront the possibility that what feels like individuality may actually be conditioning, and what feels like movement may actually be a loop disguised as progress. And once that possibility enters your mind, it becomes difficult to ignore, like a crack forming in the surface of certainty. And suddenly, the symbol becomes personal in a way that is impossible to dismiss. It is no longer just an ancient drawing or a philosophical concept. It begins to mirror your own life with uncomfortable precision. The routines you follow, the habits you repeat without question, the patterns you cannot break no matter how aware you become, the cycles of thought you return to again and again. What if these are your own Ouroboros, silently shaping your existence? This happens because the symbol is not external. It reflects your inner condition, acting as a mirror rather than a message. Therefore, recognizing the loop becomes the first step toward escaping it, but recognition itself is not easy. It requires a level of honesty that most people avoid, because it challenges the comforting belief that change is always happening. You begin to notice how often you revisit the same emotional states, the same conflicts, the same desires, even when circumstances appear different. It becomes clear that the loop is not outside you, it is within you, embedded in the way you think, react, and perceive reality. And in that moment of realization, something shifts. The circle is no longer invisible. It becomes visible, undeniable, and once seen, it cannot be unseen, to the eye. Now think about the all-seeing eye. You have seen it on currency, in media, in ancient art carved into forgotten temples, and hidden within symbols that seem to follow humanity across time. It appears in places of power, in places of secrecy, and even in everyday designs that most people never question. Most assume it represents power, surveillance, or control, a watchful force observing from above, something external, distant, and authoritative. This happens because modern interpretations reduce it to authority, framing it as a symbol of domination rather than understanding. But in Gnostic symbolism, the eye represents something entirely different, something far more intimate and transformative, awakening. Therefore, it is not about being watched, it is about finally seeing. It is not an external gaze imposed upon you, but an internal vision that emerges from within. The eye does not symbolize control over others, it symbolizes awareness of truth, the ability to perceive beyond illusion. What makes this symbol so powerful is its reversal of perspective. It shifts the focus from being observed to becoming the observer. And in doing so, it challenges a deeply rooted assumption that reality is exactly as it appears. Instead, it suggests that what you see is only a surface, and that true vision requires looking beyond appearances, beyond conditioning, beyond the narratives you have been taught to accept without question. Here is where the tension rises, quietly but powerfully. If the eye represents awareness, then most people are asleep. Not physically asleep, but perceptually, moving through life without ever truly seeing it. Gnostics believed humanity exists in a state of spiritual blindness, unaware of the deeper reality beneath appearances, trapped within layers of illusion that feel indistinguishable from truth. This happens because perception is shaped by illusion, constructed through culture, language, belief systems, and repeated patterns that define what is considered real. Therefore, the eye becomes a symbol of rebellion, the act of seeing beyond what you are told, is real. It represents a break from passive acceptance, a refusal to inherit perception without questioning it. And this is where the discomfort begins, because seeing differently often means separating from the collective way of understanding the world. It means recognizing that what most people agree upon is not necessarily truth, but shared interpretation. The deeper implication is unsettling. If your perception has been shaped rather than discovered, then how much of what you believe is actually yours? The eye does not provide easy answers. It exposes the limitations of your current vision. And in doing so, it creates a tension between comfort and truth, between remaining within illusion or stepping beyond it into something unknown. And this is the turning point, the moment where everything shifts in a way that cannot be reversed. Once you begin to see, you cannot return to ignorance. The symbol does not comfort, it disrupts, dismantling the structures that once felt stable and unquestionable. It breaks the illusion, revealing truths that are often unsettling, sometimes even disorienting. This happens because awakening is not gentle, it is transformative, and transformation rarely occurs without friction. Therefore, the eye marks a threshold, before awareness and after it. Before, the world appears solid, predictable, and defined by familiar narratives. After, it becomes layered, complex, and filled with hidden meanings that were always there but never recognized. The shift is not in the world itself, it is in your perception of it. And once that shift occurs, there is no going back to the simplicity of not knowing. You begin to notice contradictions, patterns, and underlying structures that challenge everything you once accepted as obvious. The eye does not grant peace, it grants clarity. And clarity, while powerful, comes with a cost, the loss of illusion. But within that loss lies a new kind of freedom, one rooted not in comfort, but in truth. 3. The demiurge. Now we reach one of the most controversial and unsettling ideas within Gnostic thought, the demiurge. Unlike the previous symbols, which can be easily recognized in art and culture, the demiurge often appears indirectly, symbolized through distorted, fragmented, or even unsettling imagery that seems deliberately incomplete. It represents the creator of the material world, but not as a benevolent or perfect force, rather as a flawed, ignorant, or even deceptive one. This happens because Gnostics dared to question the very nature of creation itself, refusing to accept the assumption that existence must be inherently good simply because it exists. Therefore, their symbols began to challenge everything people believed about reality, pushing beyond comfort into confrontation. The demiurge is not just a figure, it is a concept that disrupts deeply rooted beliefs about order, purpose, and design. It suggests that the world you experience may not be the ultimate reality, but a constructed layer shaped by limitations rather than perfection. This idea is difficult to accept because it goes against the instinct to trust the structure of existence. Yet within Gnostic symbolism, that discomfort is intentional. The fragmented imagery associated with the demiurge reflects a deeper message. What appears whole may actually be incomplete, and what appears authoritative may not be absolute. The symbol invites you to question not just what you see, but the very foundation of what you believe to be real. This idea creates a profound and deeply unsettling conflict. What if the world is not as it seems, not perfectly designed, but imperfectly constructed? What if the systems, structures, and truths you rely on are not reflections of ultimate reality, but products of limitation? Symbols tied to the demiurge often appear chaotic, fragmented, or deceptive, lacking the harmony one might expect from something divine or complete. This happens because they reflect a reality that is incomplete, a world that carries within it inconsistencies, contradictions, and hidden flaws that are often ignored or rationalized. Therefore, the symbol forces a deeper and more uncomfortable question. Is what you trust truly trustworthy? It challenges the assumption that authority equals truth, and that structure guarantees meaning. As this conflict deepens, it begins to extend beyond abstract philosophy into personal perception. You start to question not only the world around you, but the frameworks through which you interpret it, belief systems, institutions, narratives, and even your own conclusions. The demiurge as a symbol does not provide answers, it destabilizes certainty. And in doing so, it creates a tension that cannot be easily resolved, because it requires you to stand in uncertainty rather than retreat into familiar explanations. As this realization grows, it begins to shift everything, slowly at first, then all at once. It changes how you see authority, how you interpret truth, and even how you understand yourself within the larger structure of existence. The Gnostic journey is not about comfort. It is about confrontation, about facing the possibility that much of what you have accepted may be incomplete or misunderstood. This happens because awareness dismantles false certainty, stripping away layers of assumption that once felt solid and reliable. Therefore, the symbols become less like images and more like keys, unlocking perspectives that were previously inaccessible. Each symbol you encounter begins to connect with the others, forming a pattern that reveals something deeper than any single idea could express on its own. The Ouroboros shows you the loop, the eye allows you to see it, and the demiurge challenges the system that sustains it. Together, they create a progression, a movement from unconscious repetition to conscious awareness, and finally to critical questioning. And as this progression unfolds, it becomes clear that the journey is not external, it is internal. The symbols are not guiding you somewhere new, they are guiding you deeper into what has always been there, waiting to be recognized. And here is the ultimate revelation, the point where everything converges into a single, undeniable realization. These symbols were never meant to teach you something new, they were meant to help you remember something ancient within you. The knowledge, according to Gnostics, is not external, it is already inside, buried beneath layers of conditioning, distraction, and inherited belief. This happens because truth is not given, it is uncovered, revealed through awareness rather than delivered through instruction. Therefore, every symbol you encounter is not pointing outward, but inward, directing your attention back to a deeper level of understanding that has always existed within you. This realization is both empowering and unsettling, because it shifts responsibility away from external sources and places it entirely within your own perception. It suggests that the answers you seek are not hidden in distant places or secret teachings, but within your own capacity to see clearly. And once this realization takes hold, the search itself begins to change. It is no longer about acquiring knowledge, it is about removing illusion. The symbols do not complete you, they reveal what was never missing. And in that moment, the journey reaches its peak, not as an ending, but as a recognition. So the next time you see a serpent in a circle, an unblinking eye, or a strange, fragmented figure, pause and allow yourself to look beyond the surface. These are not random designs or decorative elements placed without intention. They are echoes of a forgotten philosophy that dared to question reality itself, leaving behind traces that continue to resonate across time. This happens because symbols endure where words fail, carrying meanings that can survive translation, distortion, and even deliberate suppression. Therefore, they continue to whisper meanings long after their origins are lost, speaking not to what you have been told, but to what you can perceive. The more you engage with them, the more they begin to reveal layers that were not immediately visible, inviting you into a deeper form of understanding that goes beyond explanation. And perhaps that is their true purpose, not to provide answers, but to provoke awareness. They remain quietly embedded in the world around you, waiting to be noticed, waiting to be understood, not by everyone, but by those willing to look beyond what is obvious. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this: you were never supposed to notice them, yet here you are seeing them differently now. This happens because awareness, once sparked, cannot be undone. Therefore, the question is no longer whether these symbols are real, but whether you are ready to understand what they reveal.